So this is sort of I think this is the healthcare startup section of the program. Although both of you have been in business for quite a while, we've been on stage before. It's been fascinating to watch your businesses evolve. But I think maybe we should start by saying like what your companies do, and then we can talk a little bit more about what it's like to have a healthcare startup, what the challenges are, and sort of how you're navigating those waters. But Sumit, you've got the device right here. Talk to us about what it is and how it's evolved over the years.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having us. I'm the founder of my fifth company, founder CEO of a company called Cherish. Fifth company in healthcare in the past 30 years. Very, very different from everything we've done before. First three companies were all about data management. Third company that we took public was a lab, blood-based lab testing device. This time, we decided to go completely away from everything we'd learned, or learn from everything we'd learned and do something very differently, which is build a device that goes into people's homes to meet a need that is growing increasingly faster and faster. People who are either aging or living with health challenges, where we can bring health and safety into their homes without a doctor's order, right? This is really, one of the things that I say very frequently now is if it's got a billing code, I don't want to talk about it. We went straight for a giant need, which is how do people who are starting to show signs of frailty actually continue living wherever they want to live with independence, with freedom, with joy, without feeling like they now have to give up everything that they've built over the past many, many years, perhaps decades of their lives, and move into places, essentially restarting life just to be safe. Right? So what we did is built a replacement for that pendant. That's what this is. This is a device that looks like a speaker, sits in a corner of your home, and monitors the entire home through two walls up to 40 feet away using radar technology to find every living being 10 times a second, know that's the family pet, that's the baby, that's grandma, what room they're in, whether they're sitting, standing, walking, or lying down, and if they've fallen. That's our opening act. While we're doing that, we also pick up their heart rate, we also pick up the respiration. All this magic happens on this. I'll tell you later about this, but that's what we're up to.
And does it, I meant to ask you this, does it work in the Z-axis?
It's the first device that we've built. The first piece application of our technology is one floor. But part of our patents allows us to have multiple devices that don't interfere with each other. So in a multi-floor home, you just put devices on each floor.
Very cool. Venk, you also have a sensor-based technology that takes a very different approach.
Yeah, thanks to the Worth team and Dan. Sumit, great to meet you. Unlike Sumit, I am a first-time founder, so I'm hoping for some successes.
You got 4 more to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just preface on the challenges. And Somi can, our previous speaker, can attest to this. Healthcare is really hard. As many things you can accomplish technologically, there's just so many headwinds that will hit you. Most importantly is probably raising capital, right? This is a very long term to return investment to shareholders when there's so many short-term ways to return money. There's a reason that there's more than 10 different food delivery apps, right, that can get funded and exit quickly. So healthcare really requires patient investors. Someone like Somi, a woman of color, raising $40, $50 million tenure, that's phenomenal. That's very hard to do. So I'll just start with the challenges there, that healthcare requires a long-term vision. I've started the company 9 years ago. We're on year 10. I thought for sure we'd be commercial by year 4 or 5 as a first-time founder. We just went commercial 4 months ago. So thank you. So, but as Somi mentioned as well, you almost pivot because of what the market is telling you as you're developing your product. So nobody could have foreseen COVID 5 years ago, right? That really encapsulated this idea of home health and digital health. What can we do outside the walls of a hospital or a cardiologist's office? So our company, Nanowear, we do home-based digital diagnostics. We offer a full cardiometabolic assessment that can be self-administered with a proprietary wearable, and then server-based analytics and AI diagnostics at home. So our foundational technology, I have a prop as well, although it looks not as technical as that, but our sensor technology is a textile-based or cloth-based sensor technology. So I'll pass this around when we're in the networking sessions. But this is the first and only cloth sensor in the world, still to date, that has been approved by FDA for capture and transmission of essential performance biomarkers. It's a little bit of a wonky physics statement, but what does that mean? That means electrical signals, acoustic signals, hemodynamic signals, activity, movement, and posture. And we all sort of are used to wearing clothing. So the idea was...
Most of us.
Most of us, right. If we're like... Right.
No judgments.
But the idea was, if you've got this really, really high user experience sensor, can you do a full workup for somebody at home? How many of you know someone that has a cardiovascular issue, or someone in your family that has a sick heart? American dies every 33 seconds from cardiovascular disease, right? So even the patients that need to see a cardiologist, you're going to hear from an incredible cardiologist later, how often are you actually seeing that cardiologist for your assessment? Maybe once every 6 months, at best, right? So the assessments need to be done more frequently, but most importantly, the doorknob doctor needs to be removed. You need to be collecting diagnostic information in your real world, which is not in the physician's office. When you go into the physician's office, you're nervous, your blood pressure can spike, you want to make sure that you're safe and healthy. So your cardiologist might not be getting the best snapshot of your actual health at that moment. So our product basically replaces the 7 to 9 diagnostic tools that a cardiologist would use through a single app. So think about having a continuous stethoscope, a continuous electrocardiograph, and a continuous blood pressure, continuous hemodynamics, continuous respiration, lung volume, activity, movement, and posture, all time synchronous. And I'll close the idea of where the AI comes in. If you're just looking at the rhythm of a heart, or you're just looking at someone's blood pressure, or you're just looking at hemodynamics, you're missing the picture of that individualized risk. Dan, Sumit, myself, our heart, our lungs, our vascular system, our metabolic system, our hemodynamic system talk to each other in very different ways. We could all have the same blood pressure through a cuff, and it's not capturing that I have a blockage here. My body's compensating and pushing blood in so many different ways, but my blood pressure on my arm is normal, right? If you can correlate what your blood pressure with your rhythm, with your lung volume, your cardiopulmonary, with your hemodynamics, and then add continuous glucose, understanding what your food is doing to you, and your blood draws. Those are 2 recent partnerships that we just announced 6 weeks ago with Dexcom, the market leader in continuous glucose monitoring. So their data goes through our app now and our server, and we can correlate those aspects of cardiometabolic health and really understand that individualized precision between Dan's cardiometabolic state, Sumit's, and myself. So excited to meet several of you throughout the day, but long-winded answered on what the challenges are and what we do.
So I want to ask a question about cost. That's going to come up a little bit later, so prepare yourselves. But let's just underline of so let's say somebody buys these solutions, they have them in their home. What is the impact on their well-being? Where does the data go? How is it actionable? And I submit, it's really about fall detection being one of the biggest applications, right?
Yeah, just before this session started, I was in the hallway hearing the story about somebody who's now looking to move their mom into some sort of supported living, or at least a senior living community where they're going to be safer than where they are right now. They've already downsized into an apartment. That's not safe enough, right? And so that's really the need that we're looking to meet. And we're looking to meet that need by recognizing that people don't change behavior in a sustainable way over time. You can give them gadgets to wear. You can ask them to wear pendants. Those pendants are themselves, not things that people love to wear. You hear so many stories about people falling and being 4 feet away from a pendant. They couldn't reach it because they broke a hip. and now they've been on the ground for 2 or 3 days, and they've got kidney failure, and they're disoriented, and it's the beginning of the end of life. That's what we're hoping to avoid initially. And for that, the place where we let folks know that something's up is their family, their friends, what we call a care circle. Whoever subscribes can set that up, and there's an unlimited number of folks you can do that with. So let me walk you through a story, a real-world example. Dad falls, daughter lives a 4-hour flight away, alarm goes off on her app. She taps a button. This looks like a speaker. It is a speaker. It's got microphones built in. You no longer have to worry about whether Dad's going to answer a phone or whether it's charged, whether he's sitting on it or it's lost in the cushions of a sofa, right? This thing's going to ring. And so Liz is on the phone saying, "Hey, Dad, you okay?" And she's not getting the answer. So she uses her app to conference in the neighbor, who is also in the care circle. And, "Hey, Betty, can you please walk over? Dad's not answering. Can you see what's up?" And so Betty walks over, and she's on her app the whole time. She's talking. And because we built an open platform, when Betty gets to the front door, through the door camera, you can see it's her. Liz can see that in her app, and she can unlock the front door through her app, a 4-hour flight away, right? And so now she's let her in. While that's all happening, our 24/7 monitoring service, which is run by one of the world's largest home security firms, they're one of our partners, distribution partners, they've already called in because they got the alarm at the same time. And so they're triaging and trying to figure out, "Mr. Jones, are you okay?" And they're not getting any answer, but now that Betty's in the room, they can all triage together, and pretty soon there's ambulance, fire, police, whatever's needed at the scene, right? So that is what we're aiming to do, and it's utterly life-changing, as you can imagine, right? It's not just peace of mind, it's for caregivers, it's really peace of mind for the folks whose homes this is in. And the magic here is that we've done this with no behavior change and no loss of dignity or privacy. That's really what this has been about. We started off with a camera-based system. Our first prototype had an infrared camera. That was January of 2020. 4 months before COVID, I started a hardware company with a global supply chain, right? We're still here. And with that camera, the first survey we ran with ARP, 1,000 people, twice, we ran that survey. We knew that we'd hit the nail on the head with the idea of passive monitoring, that if you could put something in people's homes where they didn't have to think about it, if we could account for the fact that as you get into later stages of life where you don't even remember that you have a gadget to wear, much less wear it, remember to charge it, all those things, that would be life-changing. The thing that everyone hated was that it had a lens on it, and it didn't matter what the lens did, that had to go, right? It was loss of privacy and dignity, and that was the last thing we wanted to do. And so we spent literally 4.5 years getting rid of that lens. That's what this is. This is a radar-based system. Literally last night, 7 p.m., we got FCC certified. So that's huge, right? What that means is we can now start shipping this, and we can start recognizing revenue as of this morning. It'll take a few weeks to push the thing through the manufacturing cycle, but this is now going to come to places near you, and that's the entire operating model. Now that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've built a general purpose instrument that picks up health and safety information from inside your home across multiple rooms for multiple people. Single device, multiple rooms, multiple people. Sees through walls, monitors the health and safety of multiple people. But our vision, of course, heart rate, respiration are the immediate next things. I'll tell you a little really cool fact. We didn't teach this, how to find people, by telling it that this is what people are in terms of very specific criteria. We simply pointed out to people as you were training the AI, that's a person, et cetera. That's a living being. That's where we started, so that it would pick up pets as well. Our AI figured out that a signature of living beings is breathing. It figured out that living beings have this pattern that is regularly repeating. And that's how we locate people no matter where they are. And then based on that, the next wave of our AI then figures out whether they're sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. So now we know their activity. And the next piece of AI then detects whether they've fallen, and because we are actually extracting 13 points in your body with a skeleton, we can actually tell whether you've fallen even if it's not a hard fall. Right? If you grab onto something on the way down, 70% of the falls are like that in the real world. You grab onto something on the way down, back of a sofa, side of a table, you make your way, you still slump to the ground, you're still having a hard time getting up, you might have hit your head on when you landed on the ground, but an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, a wearable patch didn't pick that up because it didn't trigger an accelerometer. Well, we catch those. You might have pulled a shelf down on yourself, a bookshelf. You might be pinned under it, and this thing wouldn't have gone off. Right? So we pick all of that up. And we still call that our opening act because there's so much more that we planned with this technology that we can just think of this as a platform that's just going to keep evolving over time in your home once you have it.
All right, Venk, what's your use case? Somebody has, is it a shirt? I mean, is it something you, like, walk us through the use case and the benefits for the user.
Yeah, so use case, business model, and cost, I'll try to keep them separate, but they're, of course, interrelated. But number one, I want to say to Sumit, awesome what he's doing. The treadmill in my parents' house petrifies me, that my father uses every morning, and I replaced it and got a stationary bike. He's still kicking and screaming about it, but when he turned 82, I was like, I know you're doing this every day, but I'm petrified about a fall. So thank you for that. But from our current device, which has 4 FDA approvals, the cloth that we talked about, the device itself, then a fully integrated software platform that's a separate FDA approval, and then our first AI diagnostic, which is capturing across all 4 classes of hypertension and continuous blood pressure that doesn't use a cuff or cut off your blood from an auscultatory method. So our product is, it's kind of like a beauty pageant sash. You wear it over your right shoulder for 45 minutes to 90 minutes. We don't see a use case to wear it 24/7. This is for diagnostic assessment, not a screener like an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring or something. And I think there's great places in the market for them. I think of screeners as sort of consumer wearables down to diagnostics and then to therapeutics. We're kind of positioning ourselves in the middle there. So if you think about a patient that should be seeing a cardiologist regularly but is not, that's the patient and the use case we want to be able to deliver our product and our technology to. And our thesis has always been democratizing access, right? Because the burden of our healthcare system in America is not from, this crowd, right, in general, or the affluent, those of us that have health insurance and can stay on top of it. It's our more vulnerable, right? In rural communities, urban communities, people are working 2 to 3 jobs just to go see a cardiologist. That might take your whole day out. And so that's why it's just not happening. So we can bring technology into someone's home that passively, with the dignity aspects that you were talking about, that they can throw the sash on for 45 minutes to an hour, potentially on a monthly basis, right? And get that structured data to their caretakers and their cardiologists. That's informing not only the patient, but their caretakers and their physician to act earlier and get to early diagnosis and preventative care. That's the only way we're going to bend the cost curve, right? Do we keep people out of the hospital from getting ER-based surgeries because, their heart stopped ticking and we have to revive them, for example? That's the use case. Now, we can't get to health systems and payers based on our current infrastructure because there's no reimbursement for what our solution is. If you guys are familiar with this space, the Johnson administration back in the 60s set up Medicare and Medicaid, created buckets of codes and coverage models, and they couldn't have anticipated home-based digital health that isn't requiring a person of labor, a medical nurse or a physician that is reimbursed for their time, the technical services that are done at a hospital, the facility costs, as well as the tools, the devices, or the therapeutics that might be being deployed. So We unfortunately fell, or fortunately fell into a cash pay model in the clinical research environment. That's our sort of opening act, as Sumit said. Cash pay, I mean that pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, direct-to-consumer companies, they're doing research on their future products or their current members. And they pay for those clinical studies. It's a $55 billion market that is continuing every single year as we continue to age and get older. So if we can, every product out there is affecting your heart, it's affecting your lungs, it's affecting your blood pressure, it's affecting your blood sugar, even if it's not the purpose of that drug. From a safety standpoint, we need to understand what a drug is doing to all of those systems. So in a 5-year clinical study that a company like Pfizer or Novartis would run, these patients need to go get an assessment once every 3 months, once every 6 months to understand the safety and efficacy of that product while it's in the clinical trial phase. So we can get them a lot more data at a fraction of the cost by keeping those clinical trial enrollees at home. And more importantly, we're giving them real-world evidence as opposed to a 30-second blood pressure cuff reading, as I mentioned, right? So they get a lot more insight into their patient population. But most importantly, if you think about how we're talking about data and generalizability and applying AI models, you better make sure that you're training those models on what is representative of the US population, right? I love our friends at Mayo Clinic and all the great academic centers, but if they keep running AI models on their 40 years of patient history, I can promise you that model, even if it gets FDA approved, is not going to work in Mississippi. It won't work in Honduras. It won't work in Africa, right? So if you need to be generalizable across at least the US Census, which is all we're approved for, you've got to be able to get in people's homes from an access standpoint. You've got to be minimum 15% Black Americans, 19% Hispanic Americans, 50-50 gender split, BMIs from 18 to 42. If you're not building models across the representation, that's going to be a problem. So pharma companies, med tech companies, direct-to-consumer companies really like that generalizability. And, of course, our friends in D.C. at FDA, who we consider partners to the fullest, they really are going to require this for AI going forward. So we can collect the real-world evidence in a cash pay model through the research community and then go to Medicare and Medicaid in a particular disease state and say, look at the data we collected on 1,000, 2,000 patients that are sick, right? People that are in clinical trials are generally on the edge of the spectrum, and say we need a new home-based code and coverage on a national basis that's going to really reduce the fraction of the cost. Sumit's been in this game for a long time. The problem with digital health is that when you're asking for reimbursement, it's a zero-sum game. We can't just keep increasing the amount of spend. Something else needs to get cut. So if you can really make the argument, not just on value-based care down the road, but how much money am I saving today on day zero, right? And also navigate the fact that there's sort of wins from a labor and physician standpoint that don't want your solution, right? They get paid on a traditional way, right? We talked about being controversial. They will, big systems might be really excited about technology and like, the comp committee's not going to be interested in using your technology because there'll be a lot of pushback. So I think that there's a way to kind of make the argument on access, but you really have to sort of present the argument that you're saving money incredibly exponentially upfront. And I'm not talking about $2 to $1.80. You got to go $2 to like 20 cents, right? That type of factor of cost reduction can't be argued irrespective of who your buyer is.
So I think there's things I like about both your solutions is that they don't require a lot of change on the user behavior side. And I think everybody's sort of clear that there's this resistance institutionally to these new technologies. You're just bringing these things to market. They've been in development for 5 years. It sounds to me like you're going to need another 5 to really go wide. But what advice would you give people working in the sector? All these great new technologies coming online, great AI innovations, and then they're slamming into this billing code problem. Like, how do you've given us a hint about how you've navigated it, but what advice do you have for other entrepreneurs?
I think it's the hint is actually the message. When I started this company, we didn't have a name for it, so we called it FTM Solutions, which stood for Follow the Money. And we didn't mean follow the money as in, follow the money with greed. It was follow the spend, follow where the waste and abuse is. And as we started following the money, original idea, I 4 companies in healthcare, I was going to do a 5th one in healthcare, right? And so we followed the money, and we found ways of saving 18 to 42% of a hospitalization's cost by moving that ER admission into the home, right? So that was like the early days. We ran 2 years before we started this company, ran essentially a little incubator on the side, figuring this stuff out. And then we hit this wall. This wall was the CFO of the hospital who said, what if it works? Because they get paid by having heads in beds. And if we were able to actually prove that we could do the same thing in really large numbers, in meaningful numbers, 40, 50% of folks being admitted into the emergency room actually could be redirected home within 4 hours and save 18 to 42% of costs on an admission. Well, it saves payers and employers an enormous amount of money. It saves the federal government, Medicare, enormous amount of money. And it completely destroys the top line of the health system, right? And so that's why that's not going to happen. And as we learned that lesson before we started this company, officially started this company, we said, well, follow the money really means that we actually have to break out. This kind of thinking is not going to solve the crisis we were looking to solve, which is runaway costs. I was in a major healthcare conference, up on stage, somebody from a health system you named, on stage, very close friend, one of my investors, works at that health system, and literally asked the audience, if we could eradicate a certain type of cancer, but our healthcare spend as part of GDP went from 20% to 22%, 23%. Wouldn't you all call that a good thing? And I sat up on stage kind of going, wait, that's not the right argument. You can have it both ways. You can actually take cost out and eradicate things by reducing the things, eliminating the things where you have waste. Here's the problem with value-based care. Here's the problem with all the fee-for-service models. Companies like us who bet on savings show up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed with technology to solve the problem that cannot be solved without culture change in the institutions that have to adopt it. It just won't happen, right? That's where you hit the wall. So the answer to your question, summary, look outside healthcare.
All right, Venk, you get the last word. You got 1 minute to give advice to future entrepreneurs.
Twofold. Understand who's paying you before you start building your product. Whether that's a consumer purchase, whether you can fit under existing reimbursement. If I could do it over again, I would have started there. We started by building technology and then figuring out the problem and how we were getting paid. So I would do that. And then the second thing is find really patient investors. As I mentioned at the top, healthcare is a really long journey from a technological standpoint. And then the third thing I would say is look to your left and look to your right and try to learn as many lessons from those that came before you. Being first is not always the best thing, particularly in healthcare and digital health, for example. I would consider ourselves in generation 3 of digital health in just 10 years. And there were a bunch of companies that raised billions of dollars with all the promise in the world, and there were 0 now because they never actually worked and they couldn't find who was paying. So really build a network of people that can teach you. I always joke that the best skill that I could possibly have as a founder is collecting big brothers and big sisters in the industry. And I think an event like this leads to that.
Oh, you stole my transition. No, actually, it's a great time to do it because we're actually going to go into a quick 15-minute break. I would encourage you all to find some big brothers and big sisters in the room, and we'll meet back here in 20 minutes. Thank you so much, and let's give it a big round of applause.